Welcome back to week 5 of our fall Bible study, Proverbs, the Path of Wisdom. Well, one of my pastors and a dear brother in the faith, Dr. Erwin Ince, recently published the book, The Beautiful Community. And in his introduction, he gives us a new set of lenses as we begin to see and better understand the racial history of the American church and the biases that we all have. But I think this introduction can also be incredibly helpful for us too, as we continue to look at life through the lens of Proverbs. In his book, Dr. Ince writes, in the concluding words of his Southern Christian Leadership Convention address in 1967, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. exhorted his hearers with the challenge to depart with a divine dissatisfaction. That is, a God-given dissatisfaction with the way things are when contrasted with how they ought to be according to God's standard. God exposes his heart to us in his word. He declares his purposes for his creation, yet the effects of human sin permeate the cosmos. Things are not the way that they ought to be. It is impossible to be a Christian and not have a divine dissatisfaction with particular ways in which the reality of sin impacts us, our neighbors, our institution, and our world. Well, Dr. Ince, he continues on to unpack his own life experience and his desire to see God's covenant people from diverse communities and ethnicities coming together in the local church. And while I highly recommend purchasing and reading this book as a trusted resource on the church's identity and mission, well, my purpose to introducing the idea of divine dissatisfaction is that I believe it's a very helpful way for us to name many of the tensions that we feel in various aspects of our life. So what I'm proposing to you is that in the next 3 talks is that, yes, we live in a broken world and we are broken people, but as the Lord's family, we are given the blessing of divine dissatisfaction. Because often, if we trace our struggles down to their root, whether they be in relationships with controlling our tongue, our frustrations with work, or misplaced trust in our wealth, well, many of our struggles can be summed up as divine dissatisfaction. We feel dissatisfied, and we know that things are just not the way they're supposed to be. Again, divine dissatisfaction is a God-given dissatisfaction with the way things are when contrasted with how they ought to be according to God's standards. And Proverbs, as we have seen each week, helps us better understand God's heart and his standards. So if you'll pray with me, and we will dive into the teachings of Proverbs for this week. Lord Father, give us eyes to see and ears to hear your truth. Help us, Lord, grow into women who use our speech to build up and give life. Amen. Well, this week you've spent time discovering God's standards when it comes to the use of our tongue. You see, our speech is the most commonly discussed theme in Proverbs. There are 90 proverbs alone on how we use our words, speech, and our tongue. And in Proverbs, as in much of the rest of the Bible, we see that our speech is either life-giving or life-taking, but it is always life-reflecting. Our words, well, they reflect the state of our heart. So as we begin our discussion on this topic, I want us each to take a moment and think. What would your life be like if you had never had any words of criticism? I mean those painful or harsh words that you hang on to, the ones that linger and cause you to close yourself off or maybe lash out at others or doubt your abilities. Take a moment to think. What insecurity, cynicism, or maybe anger would you be relieved of? If those harsh words had never been a part of your story, how might your life and your relationships look different? Have you got 1 or 2 in mind? Okay, now take a moment to think of the opposite. What would your life look like if the words of encouragement, of support, words that helped form your courage and point you in the right direction? Well, what would your life look like today if that friend, spouse, parent, coach, or pastor had never spoken those words to you? Who would you be if those kind words or encouragements or redirections had never been spoken to you? Words have power. And Proverbs wants us to see that the wise man or woman knows this to be true. So Proverbs 18:21 tells us that death and life are the power of the tongue. And Proverbs 10:11 says that the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. Or we can look at Proverbs 12:25, which encourages us that anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down. Oh, but a good word makes him glad. It's beautiful, isn't it? Our words matter. And Proverbs is really telling us that we will never be wise if we cannot control, for good or for bad, our tongue and the words that we speak. Here, I would also like to point out that when I say words, speech, or tongue, I include the words that we speak face to face, of course, but also the voice in our head, the ones we text and tweet, and the ones that we put out on social media, because all words that come from us are a part of us. So how do we use our words? How do we grow in wisdom as it pertains to our speech? Well, a common American proverb, one dealing with words that I'm sure you all know, is that sticks and stones may break my bones, but yes, words will never hurt me. Well, we all know this is completely untrue. So I prefer my take on the proverb, as I think it is much more accurate. So sticks and stones, well, yes, they may break my bones, but words, well, they will make me spend thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours in counseling. Sisters, if we are not careful with our words, if we don't do the work to gain wisdom, or as Proverbs 10:11 just said, to become women who are wise and righteous with mouths that are a fountain of life. If we don't do the work to control our tongue, then the words that we think and speak out loud have the strong possibility of being words of division. Life-taking words that destroy intimacy, trust, and wreck our relationships. James, the brother of Jesus, in his book, describes words as having the possibility of being a great forest fire, which can stain the body and set fire to the entire course of one man's life. Our words matter. Well, when writing about how the Proverbs deal with speech, the theologian Derek Kidner wrote that what is done to you is of little account besides what is done in you, for good or for ill. Well, what does he mean by that? He means that words change us, and the wise woman, she knows it. Well, think back to the exercise we did at the beginning of the lesson. Remember how the words of encouragement or of criticism have in some way shaped who you are and how you see and interact with the world. This is because the words that we consume and the words that we produce have the power to shape beliefs and convictions. They have the power to both heal and to destroy, which of course is why Proverbs wants us to grow wise. So what does having wisdom in our words look like? What does it mean to be women who speak life-giving words? Well, first, the wise woman knows the power and value of her words. And second, the wise woman knows the source and purpose of her words. The first point we've mostly covered already. Proverbs teaches that the wise woman knows the power and value of her words. In a number of sayings, including Proverbs 15:4, a gentle tongue is a tree of life, but a perverseness in it breaks the spirit. In Proverbs 12:18, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Your words have the power to heal or to harm, to give hope or perpetuate despair. And sometimes the value of your words can even come from knowing when not to speak them. Our words have power and value, and we must be constantly on guard against how we use our speech. Well, the second way that we can all continue to grow is by realizing that the wise woman knows the source and purpose of her words. Proverbs 27:19 says, "As in water, face reflects face, so the heart of man reflects the man." And Proverbs 4:23, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life." Our words, sisters, they reflect our hearts. So when we belittle someone in our small group or another mom in your child's class, what are those words reflecting about the state of your heart? Or when you lash out at a spouse or a roommate over the condition of the house, I think we've all done that. What do those words reflect about the current condition of your heart? I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it again, but Proverbs is written to the covenant people of God. When we say something that's way off base or unkind, we are not going to lose our salvation over that mistake. Christ is not about cancel culture. But Proverbs and other passages of the Bible give us the invitation to address the source of our words, the good ones and the bad ones. So when you lash out at that spouse and roommate, what is going on under those words? Well, Proverbs says the wise woman takes a moment to reflect and see the hurt, the fear, the frustration that is the root source of your thought or emotions. As a side note, I will say that I think my version of the American proverb is better. God gives us gifted and trained counselors who at times can help us navigate the roots of our heart. So if you are considering or ready to sit with a counselor, I would say that the care team here at Christ Pres is very helpful with supporting and connecting you. So if that is something you need, we're happy to help you with that. But our words, they're powerful, and we need to identify their root. But the wise woman, she does not just stop when she identifies the human source or cause of her words. You see, when Proverbs 10:11 tells us that the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, that fountain of life flows out of a greater source than our finite righteous obedience. It flows out of the only source of life. Psalm 36, verses 7 and 9 were written by Solomon's father, King David. Those verses say, "How precious is your steadfast love, O God. The children of mankind take refuge in the shadow of your wings, for with you is the fountain of life. In your light do we see light." The wise woman knows the source of her words flow out of the source of her identity as one pursued and protected by the never-changing, never giving up, steadfast love of her Father. You see, healing and protective words can flow when you see that you have been in need of refuge. And the one who heals and protects, well, he's received you and healed you in abundance. And words of light and life can be spoken into dark places when you know that Christ's healing light found you in the dark places, and that light will never, ever grow dim. And you can speak life-giving words because your life comes not from your own power, position, striving, or good work, but from the fountain of life, the fountain filled with blood, drawn from Emmanuel's veins, where sinners plunge beneath their flood, lose all their guilty stains. The dying thief rejoiced to see that fountain in his day, and there may I, though vile as he, wash all my sins away. On the night before he was crucified, Jesus took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And likewise, the cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." These words are spoken as we gather for corporate worship to help us remember every single week the fountain of life. But did you know that those were not the only words that Jesus said that night? On the night before he was crucified, Jesus gave one last teaching to his beloved disciples and followers. Jesus, who was about to be tortured and rejected. Jesus, who willingly came into this world with the purpose of taking the judgment of God for the sin of our tongues, for us. And Jesus, whose life was taken because of the life-taking words that we speak every day. This same Jesus took his last night to speak life-giving words, not shame or blame, but words of comfort and assurance to his beloved disciples and followers, to you and to me. And his final lesson, recorded in John 13 through 17, is filled with repetition. And do you know what the most repeated words were on that dark night? Love, hope, joy, peace. You see, Jesus knew the power of his words, and he wanted nothing more than to fill his followers with hope and life. May we follow in his footsteps as we grow in wisdom and become women who use our words to bring life and hope to those who are all around us. If you'll pray with me. Lord Father, give us eyes to see and ears to hear your truth. Help us grow into women who use our speech to build up and give life. Amen. Again, I hope your time studying Proverbs this week, the depth, the breadth, and also in your small group sharing, I hope that it is a real blessing. I look forward to our time together again next week.